Good afternoon. We'll now call the meeting of the Waco City Council, October 15, 2019, to order at 3 p.m. Welcome to our guests. All council members are present. Please join us for a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now recess the regular session and convene to work session with a report from the city manager.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. There are no changes to the agenda today. Under employee recognition, I'd like to recognize one of our fleet service riders in our service department, our fleet department, Hayla Norris. Hayla, would you please stand? Hayla was on her way to work last Thursday morning, and she came across a fairly serious accident, and she provided some assistance and was helpful until the fire department could get there. We got a really nice letter from Battalion Chief Patrick Kerwin about her efforts, and he asked that we extend the entire fire department's gratitude to Hayla for her work and helping to make a bad situation not as bad as it could have been. And so we wanted to thank Hayla and recognize her for her work. Thank you, Hayla. Also under employee recognition, I'd like to call on Assistant City Manager Bradley Ford to introduce our new zoo director.
Thanks, Wiley. Yeah, it's a big day. And I have the joy of introducing today Chris Van Skyke to the City Council as the new director of the Cameron Park Zoo. He's actually joining us after 21 years of leadership experience at the San Antonio Zoo. And there he oversaw a variety of operations, facilities, construction, and also human resources and financial management, which I think will tie him nicely to the leadership team at the Cameron Park Zoo. We did select Chris using a joint panel between city staff and the Zoological Board. And so we're excited to have him start work later in November. He's kind of had a marathon day thus far. He's met with board members as well as zoo staff today. So please join me in welcoming him to our team.
Very good.
Welcome, Chris. We appreciate you being here this afternoon and look forward to your work with our great team at the zoo. Thanks for being here. And Bradley, thank you for the work that you and the selection team did in going through this process.
And now I'd like to call on Larry Holsey for the Holsey report.
All right, thank you very much. If you'll turn your attention to your monitors, the Cameron Park Zoo has a new educational exhibit for their raptors, which include red-tailed hawk, peregrine falcon, and a caracal bird. The exhibit features an outside area where raptors will rotate for viewing, and on an educational porch where a keeper will occasionally have one on display for educational purposes. The new building, scheduled to be complete by the 1st of November, is being constructed primarily by zoo staff and resembles a blacksmith shop. It's located near the Brazos River area in the zoo. Citizens and neighbors all across the city came out for the evening of October the 1st to celebrate National Night Out. 14 neighborhoods scheduled a caravan of first responders to come to their event. Baylor students got an up-close look at how quickly a dorm fire can burn out of control with a live demonstration put on by the Waco firefighters. All in all, it was a great night to get together as friends and neighbors to take a bite out of crime and some good food too. Solid Waste Services is getting the word out across the town with the new bench ads that help people know how easy and important it is to recycle. City Waco Transit benches can be found at 5 locations throughout the city, and they display a clean, fresh reminder for everyone to recycle. On Wednesday, October the 2nd, Mayor Deaver and Councilmember Hector Sabito, along with City Manager Wiley Stem, participated in an exciting groundbreaking for a new $6.5 million Belmont Village development led by NeighborWorks, which will bring 54 affordable units to the Waco housing market. On the evenings of Saturday, October the 5th and Sunday, October the 6th, the Waco Fire Department observed National Fallen Firefighters Day by lighting each of its outside fire stations in red. The 67th annual Heart of Texas Fair and Rodeo ended its 11-day run on Sunday, October the 13th, and thanks to an overall great weather, fair officials reported that over 223,000 people passed through the gates, 20% more than last year. For those who couldn't go to the fair, the Waco City Cable Channel staff aired one of our You Are There live broadcasts on Tuesday, October the 8th at 7 p.m., where we walked viewers all around the fair, letting them see and hear the live sounds of the fair through our HD camera, just as if we are alive, as if you were there in person. The convention center has had a unique booth at the fair. It's called a scavenger hunt where the people could scan a series of QR codes on their phones, answer facts and history questions about Waco, and be eligible to win Waco Fun Passes to local attractions. Downtown Waco and Waco Convention Center were filled with all forms of art on the weekend of October the 4th through the 6th, as the Waco Cultural Arts Fest provided the opportunity for people of all ages to experience 6 forms of art: music, dance, science, word, film, and traditional art. Council District 5 cleanup was held on Saturday, October the 5th, where residents were able to put bulky items and other trash at their curb to be collected. Over 65 tons of bulky trash, including 2 refrigerators, 2 sets of washer dryers, 16 TVs, and 4 freezers, plus over 85 tons of brush were collected during the one-day event. Baylor University celebrated its 110th annual homecoming with the annual parade through downtown Waco and their game against Texas Tech at McLean Stadium. Area hotels were filled with returning alumni from around the country. Coming up, the Fire Station number 5 ribbon cutting will be held Friday morning, October the 25th at 10:30 a.m. with special guest Senator John Cornyn. The West Waco Library and Genealogy Center will host their annual lock-in on this Friday, October the 18th, and on Saturday, October the 19th, the Waco Mammoth National Monument will host their annual Fall Fossil Festival. That same evening, the Cameron Park Zoo will hold their 19th annual fundraiser, Brew at the Zoo, beginning at 6 p.m., and the Convention and Visitors Bureau staff have a booth at Magnolia's Celebration that expected to bring 35,000 visitors are expected to the event on October the 17th through the 19th. On Saturday, October the 26th, the Waco Police Department, along with Drug Enforcement Administration, will participate in Drug Take-Back Day, giving the public an opportunity to prevent pill abuse, theft, accidental consumption by children, and anyone who wants to drop drugs off can take it to the police tower at 3115 Pine Avenue. And that completes my report.
That's another great report, Larry. Thanks for sharing all the great things that are going on around our city.
Thank you, Larry. Mayor and Council, there are 11 public hearing items today. 10 of them are planning items that Clint Peters will cover during the work session. Under resolutions, there are 11 today. I'm going to highlight just a few of those. Resolution 2019-805 ratifies a discretionary service agreement with Encore for the conversion of about 3,500 feet of overhead high voltage wire to underground for the Bridge Street Waco's Front Porch project along the Brazos River. We're bringing this to you today as a ratification due to the timing that was needed to schedule some available and unassigned Encore crews before they were assigned elsewhere. The ability to use those crews will help us meet the scheduled spring 2020 deadline for street pavement improvements there on Bridge Street. And I want to thank Encore for agreeing to assign a crew over there and get them on duty pretty quickly, because this is a critical part. Getting that relocation done is critical to the project. Resolution 2019-806, this is an agenda item that has to do with a resolution that y'all approved on September 3rd, 2019, to authorize the forgiveness of all active rehabilitation and reconstruction home loans currently in the city's loan portfolio that closed before August 31st, 2009. This resolution today will provide authorization for the staff to forgive all additional rehabilitation and reconstruction loans that closed after August 31st, 2009 that are currently in the existing loan portfolio as they reach their respective 10-year anniversary date.
I had a question on this one. I am in favor of the program. I'm in favor of the forgiveness of debt that we talked about before, as far as forgiving the debt on all the current, everything that's 10 years old. So we're doing. What we're saying today is that we are going to forgive everything for the next 10 years, right? Is that what we're saying? Year by year, it's an automatic.
Yeah, so as they reach their 10-year maturity date, that means that they have completed and met the affordability period for the dollars that were used to implement those loans.
Are there payment plans that go? What does a typical repayment plan look like? Or I don't know.
We'll can respond to that.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The repayment plans vary. There are some that were established as a 30-year due on sale clause, meaning that it was not forgiven at all, so the balance would be due if in the event that they sold before that 30-year period was up. Some are half forgivable, some are half repayment, meaning that if, let's say, for example, there was a loan of $20,000 provided over a 10-year period, $10,000 of that would be repayment, $10,000 of that would be forgiven. So the repayment amounts range from $25, some up to $100. There's really a variety of loan terms that were established during this time period.
So, and again, I am in favor of the proposal of forgiving the ones that were 10 years old or more. I just want to be careful that we don't really breach the program that we have and compromise the possibility of having this program continue by basically forgiving debt in advance. Because will the borrowers now have any incentive to pay for the next 10 years is what I'm trying to figure out. If there is a loan with a monthly payment required, I assume there are some of those, do they have any incentive of paying now for the next 10 years since we're today proposing to forgive that debt 10 years from now?
Well, they'll continue to pay up until their 10-year anniversary date.
But if they don't, is there a consequence? I guess that's where I'm trying to get.
Well, they wouldn't receive any consequence at this point in time. No, there's not a.
And my question goes more to the enforceability of the note, and because I've not seen an actual one of these notes, I guess. But I'm comfortable with approving these year by year as they come up. I'm hesitant to approve them 10 years in advance with some other council or some other program may have a totally different idea of how these should be handled.
What you're approving today is loans that have been previously established and as they reach their maturity date. So these are not any new loans. Now, during a budget and audit session, the way the program is structured now is that each person would have, as we move forward with our loan program, our rehabilitation program, individuals have a set amount of that they would be responsible for repayment. Up to the maximum repayment now would be approximately $100 a month for an individual spread out over the 10-year period. So there is some consistency in the structure of the loan program as we move forward with our new loans. All we're doing now is, the purpose of this agenda item is kind of to clean up and streamline all the older loans. So as we move forward, there's clear structures and there's not any varying terms amongst the loans.
But as I understand it, and maybe Jennifer chime in here, what we're talking about today forgives the loans for the next 10 years as they mature also, right?
What it does is it forgives existing loans we've entered into as they come to the 10-year maturity. I think your question, Councilmember Holmes, is does this take away any incentive for the current loan holder to keep current on their payments? That's your question,
Yeah,
correct?
and in some of these, they may be rehabilitating their credit where they need to show a payment string. I'm just guessing on some of this because
Right.
there wasn't a lot of support material in the agenda.
Right. I'll be glad to, at the break, talk to staff about that and get back to you.
Because, I mean, technically, would there be any incentive to continue paying if they knew in 10 years it was going to be forgiven anyway?
Yes, I totally understand your question. I don't know the answer as I sit here right now, but I'll be glad to talk to staff and get back to you.
Okay. And not that I'm against the program. I'm for the forgiveness, the one that we voted for last month. But going forward, I don't want there to be an unintended consequence of future forgiveness.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks, Wally.
Thank you. Resolution 2019-807 authorizes the use of the competitive seal proposal procedure to select a vendor to operate a pilot shared mobility program in the city. We had previously brought you a pilot program from Gotcha. After evaluating the city's needs for the pilot program and Gotcha's ability to meet those needs, we mutually agreed to terminate that contract. With council approval, the city will issue a new RFP, select a vendor to operate and manage a pilot program. The new RFP will allow the city to benefit from the latest trends and technologies in this area.
Okay, and I understand that we're making it this time so that bike companies and scooter companies can propose separately. Is that correct?
It's an and/or, so they can propose and
They propose both or either one? Okay, that's great. I think that's much better.
What's the approximate timeline that we're thinking of? I didn't see anything in the materials on, I saw that we're going to put it back out, or we're deciding on the process. But is there a general, I don't know who to ask this question to. Is there a general timeline expectation on bid process, bid review?
I believe
Contract
that,
process, implementation, is it 90 days, 6 months?
well, I believe we're hoping to bring the council a recommendation before the end of the year. And then at that time, we can bring you a timeline on implementation.
Okay.
Resolution 2019-812 is a contract for all airport car rental. And I'd like to invite Assistant City Manager Deidre Emerson to provide some background on this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you remember, this item was before you at the previous agenda, previous council meeting, and we have since that time met with the rental car agencies and talked about what our strategy could be going forward. We will, the contract language that was being sought is still is not in that contract. However, we do have established a plan to move forward together to develop a strategy to address the concerns that have been laid out by council in a more unified fashion than we've been working before.
Yeah, well, no, I appreciate that. And again, my concern was just making sure there is provision for when the unfortunate and inevitable delays and strandings happen up at DFW, that people have a way to get home, and making sure that some vehicles are, I don't know, allocated or available for folks to be able to rent to get home to kind of take care of that. But it does, I appreciate, I know we're going to be working on that both with American and with the rental car providers up at DFW, but that is the direction that we need to go with for that, to deal with it at the DFW airport level and not at our local franchisee level. So I'm okay with this one, and making sure these services continue to be provided for folks that come into our airport. Yeah, I appreciate staff's attention to this and working on addressing this issue, which needs some further addressing. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll echo John there a little bit. Thanks for taking the extra week to ask the questions and figure that out. Because I think the solution, John, is more of some other, it's outside of the rent car deal. Our solution of making sure there's credible transportation options on the Eagle flight from DFW to Waco is maybe outside of this. But again, thanks for looking into it.
Are you going to volunteer to kind of be on call?
Yeah, I'm going to be on call.
That's right.
I'll drive.
Take the DeLorean up there.
Yeah,
That's
get the DeLorean,
88 miles an hour there and back pretty
be up
fast,
there in
right?
5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, thank you. Resolution 2019-813, this is a contract with CSA Construction for the WMAR Central Plant Exhaust Quality Improvement Project. The total contract authorization is in the amount of not to exceed $940,000. We have two natural gas standby generators at the plant, and we have a TCEQ air quality permit that we have to meet. So this is the mission control equipment for those two generators. And we had two bids, but one of them did not meet the specifications. And obviously, it's important for us with an air quality permit to make sure that we meet it.
Sure.
And so we're going with the higher bid, but it's the one that meets the specifications. Resolution 2019-814 is an amendment to an existing Walker Partners contract for additional inspection services in the field during construction of the Peach Street Water System Improvements Project. The amount of the increase is $143,960. This is a really critical project. It's become more critical since the front porch, the Bridge Street project I mentioned earlier, has started, and we have a pretty tight timeline on that. But also, as they'll be connecting on the other side of the interstate, McLean Stadium side of the interstate, boring the interstate and coming across, coming up Peach Street and making several really critical fire service connections to Tejas Warehouse. And so we felt like we needed additional inspection here to be there all the time while the construction's underway, so that we make sure this project's done properly and that it ties back into the Bridge Street project appropriately and doesn't interfere with these critical timelines we have going on there. So.
Good.
And then Resolution 2019-815, this is your appointments to various boards and commissions. We have 2 ordinances today, and I'd like to call on Assistant City Manager Bradley Ford to comment on both of these ordinances.
Yes, Council, ordinance 2019-816 is on your agenda tonight as emergency reading. This is the agreement between the City of Waco and the Waco Professional Firefighters Association. This is a 4-year agreement that serves as collective bargaining between the 2 entities. And the content of this agreement certainly reflects a continued positive relationship between the association and the city. It also aligns really nicely with the council's priorities on public safety and the steps that were taken to ensure employee retention in the city. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the contributions of our negotiation team, particularly Chief Bobby Tatum, who's in the room this evening, Judith Benton from Legal, Lisa Wilcox from HR, and Tracy Ramsey from Finance. This team met with the association for many hours to put together an agreement that really recognizes a benefit to all parties. And so lastly, I also wanted to acknowledge we really wouldn't have gotten here without the council's leadership on this and your input, as well as the significant efforts by the association bargaining team, who's led by Philip Burnett. So I'll take any questions from the council at this time.
I don't have questions, but I also want to thank you, Bradley, city staff, and the association for just being so creative in the approach and really just bringing every great intention and great idea to the table to see how we can move forward. You know, public safety is definitely one of council's main priorities, and it was noted by the professionals that we have working in our community by the fire that was taking place yesterday off of Franklin Avenue, and how quickly we were there to respond it and how quickly it was put out. And so I really just do appreciate Chief Tatum, his staff, the association, city staff, just for listening to the concerns of the council and just pushing it forward. So I really do appreciate that, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll just echo that and just say that this process can be difficult in many communities, and so it speaks to the leadership both at the city and at the association level that we were able to get such a good deal that y'all worked through. So I want to say thanks to everybody for working on this, and something that I think benefits our firefighters and benefits the community for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I completely agree with both those statements, and we certainly appreciate the dedicated, difficult, dangerous, hard work that both our fire department and our police department do to protect our citizens. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into both these into this agreement. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. I'm going to speak on the next item, which second ordinance this evening relates to the police department. It's kind of a public safety theme on these ordinances. 2019-817 is an increase to our authorized strength in the police department. This is the product of the council's leadership during the budget process last year. You asked the manager's office and the police department to look at increased staffing in the police department. So we were able to budget that. This results in an increase from 203 to 210 officer grade positions, which is a net gain of 7 positions. And I talked to Chief earlier today. By his memory, it's the largest increase in police staffing in quite some time. Now that's a very positive thing that we're excited about. He has already started recruitment for these positions. There'll be an academy early next year, and these officers would hit the streets November of 2020. So thank you all for your support in this.
Very good.
I'll speak on that. I'm very excited for this. I really appreciate staff's work to ensure that this budget request was able to be achieved. I am really thankful for our police department. To echo the words of the mayor, the police department and the fire department, the officers and both of those departments put their life on the line for the city daily, and I'm grateful for that service. And I'm really thankful for both of our chiefs who do such good work and are community-minded, who have engaged in such events as the Race Equity Institute and are really, I think, thinking wisely and smartly about how to ensure that our city is safe and that their departments employ good, smart justice. And I think that ensuring that we have a robust force is a great way to make sure that our city continues to be desirable and attractive, and the core of our city is safe. So I'm really thankful for this.
I will echo Councilmember Meek in saying that as we go through what we do and we are in day-to-day communication with our constituents, you know, safety is their number one priority and their number one concern. And the increase in police service specifically will add to, I think, what we really want for our community, and that's policing that they know and that they see, and that has the, I mean, I don't know how Chief Holt is at every event that he's at, but a few more boots on the ground will allow him a little bit of help. So I'm grateful that our staff was able to find a way to make this happen so that at the end of the day, we have a greater layer of protection, a stronger force of good police, and that have the intent and focus and dedicated position of keeping our constituencies safe, keeping them sure of our police, and keeping them trusting and faithful in our police. So it's a good thing.
Okay. Thank you, council. If there's no questions, that concludes my report.
Okay, are there any items that council would like to remove from the consent agenda?
The responses on 806.
Okay, yeah, if you decide after you get that response that you'd like to pull it, just let me know before we get to the consent agenda. All right, so the consent agenda tonight will include resolutions 2019-805 through 2019-815, with the unless a visitor card is received on a consent agenda item. I'll turn it back to Wiley to continue the work session presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first work session presentation is from Clint Peters, our Director of Planning, discussion of planning public hearing items. Clint?
Thank you, Mayor. Council, we do have 10 public hearings this evening. The first 5 are special permits. The first one being a special permit request at 808 North 65th Street for a special permit type 2 in R1B zoning district. This is a single-family house on 65th Street near the JC Park and the Parkdale and Tennyson schools in our Parkdale and Viking Hills neighborhood. It is a 3-bedroom house. The owners do propose to rent out the whole house. They do live in the home and would like to rent it out during the summer and on holidays and high tourism weekends. Relatives that do live in town would manage it if they are out of town. We did get 1 card back in opposition with concerns about lowering property values in the area. And this is the house. It does meet all the parking requirements, and Plan Commission did recommend approval of this one. The next one, 796, is another special permit for a short-term rental type 2 in R1B zoning district. This is at 1019 Montclair. This is a single-family neighborhood that's just adjacent to Highway 6. Again, in the Parkdale, Viking Hills neighborhood. It is a 3-bedroom home. The owners recently bought it. They do live out of town and would like to rent it out short-term rental. They do have a daughter-in-law that lives in Waco that would manage it with the intent of moving to this home in the future. We did receive quite a bit of opposition, not at the Plan Commission hearing, but after the Plan Commission hearing, we did receive a petition that triggers the supermajority requirement. So that will require 5 out of 6 votes for approval. This is the house. They do have the appropriate parking, off-street parking to meet the ordinance requirement. And the Plan Commission did recommend approval of this one.
Did you say the petition came after the Plan Commission meeting?
We actually received the petition yesterday.
Yesterday, okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next one is another, 797 is another short-term rental type 2 at 1917 Irving Lee Street. This is in our Kendrick neighborhood. Irving Lee is the neighborhood that goes between Bagby and Highway, Interstate 35, across the street from the new HEB, Valley Mills and I-35. The owner does live in Waco, manage the property, but does not live in the home. Has the appropriate parking for the site. Plan Commission did recommend this one as well.
And there was just one opposition?
There was
to-
just
on
one,
this
one card, nobody opposed at the hearing.
Okay.
The next two, public hearing 798 and 799, are two separate applications for short-term rental type 3, which is short-term rentals in multifamily buildings, but they're actually in the same multifamily building, which is the District 12 condos along 12th Street near Baylor, I-35. Two different owners. We do have a requirement in the ordinance that you have a max of 5 units in any multifamily building for SDR type 3. This complex has 25 units, and one owner has 1 unit, and then the other owner has 2 units, so that would be 3 out of the 25. We did mail out 142 notices on this one and only had 1 card back in opposition. Plan Commission did recommend approval of both of these. Here's the complex. They do have 2 parking space. They're 2-bedroom units, and each unit has 2 rear parking spaces per unit.
So the parking requirement is not an issue at all in these both of these cases?
That's correct.
Okay.
Public hearing 800 is a special permit for a retail nursery in C2 zoning on 8.5 acres at 9605 China Spring Road.
This home's over here. I have one quick question on it. I'm sorry, I didn't catch you on it. The 2 previous one's at 1334 and one's at 1338. I'm trying to remember the density issues we had on how close can they be on these short-term rentals?
So the STR3, which is short-term rentals in a multifamily building, it's not a proximity location requirement, it's a maximum unit requirement.
Okay.
And so you're allowed to have up to 5 units per multifamily building.
Okay.
So this would be 3 out of those 5 that would be permitted,
All right.
if approved by council.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Oh, no problem.
Clint, going back to the card that was received on Z19-61-58 that was opposed, it looks like that person doesn't own that property anymore. According to the card, it said until July of 2019, we owned a unit at these condominiums. Just wonder if we noticed the prior owner and didn't get...
There is a lag time. We get the owner records from McCad
Right.
Appraisal District, and sometimes there's a lag time when properties change hands.
Okay.
So that could be the case. So public hearing 800 is a special permit for a retail nursery in the C2 zoning district. This is an 8-acre property along China Spring Road, north of Flat Rock Road. This is the old Storms Nursery that operated for several decades out in China Spring area. They went out of business about 3 or 4 years ago. And a new nursery, Barrera's Nursery, that has locations in Robinson and Lorena, has purchased the property and would like to use it for a nursery as well. It is a commercial area. They would use the facility as is, and all the existing buildings and parking area, and so no changes to that. No opposition on this one. Plan Commission recommended approval. The next public hearing, 801, is another property out in China Spring Road, 9519. This is a rezoning from R1B to C2 and a land use change from residential to mixed-use flex. This is actually a property that abuts the nursery property. It is a single-family home now. The area, the adjacent properties are all commercially zoned, and they would request this to be rezoned commercial so they can use it for commercial uses. You can see the property here. Looks like it's pretty residential, but then when you start looking at both directions on either side, it's a heavily commercial area. Had no opposition on this one, and Plan Commission recommended this as well. The next public hearing, 802, this is an amendment to a concept PUD plan on 36 and a half acres of land located east and north of 9821 Chapel Road. This is the property along Chapel Road that y'all previously seen in different applications. I thought it would be good to give a little background on this, give a little context of where we are now. This property is broken up into two pieces. There's an 8-acre tract here that's adjacent to Chapel Road, and then there's a larger 26.5-acre tract, this triangle piece in the rear. Cornerstone Group, who's actually the applicant on this, had a PUD approved for the 8 acres back in 2018 for 50 units with a density of about 6.5 units per acre. It was a mix of duplexes and single family. Just after that was approved, the triangle piece behind that was owned by Lehigh Cement Company was put on the market and sold to a developer, WDA Development, that bought all the Lehigh property along Old McGregor, which included this triangular piece. That developer, WDA, actually came in for rezoning the multifamily on the triangle piece that was recommended for disapproval by Plan Commission and then withdrawn at City Council. Cornerstone Development then put the 28.5-acre tract under contract and brought in an amended PUD to include all of that acreage into one PUD that included some single family, which is this purple area. This orange area is a mix of single family and some townhouse product, and then this bluish area was multifamily townhouse product. They had proposed 395 total units, which was about 10.8 units an acre. Staff and the Plan Commission and ultimately City Council approved this, recommended a maximum density of 9 units an acre, which was 330 total units for that property. And so this plan right here was approved by City Council in August of this year. So he did bring back an amendment. The developer does now own all of the 36 acres. He did bring an amendment, which is what is in front of you tonight, that reduced the density down to 330 units. I'm sorry, 311 units, which is about 8.5 units per acre. They also added more single-family mix and multifamily and did away with the townhouse. And then the big change is they put a new connection point, entry point from the single-family portion of the development into the Western Ridge adjacent single-family neighborhood off of Meadow Mountain. We did get, at the Plan Commission hearing, we did get a lot of opposition from the Western Ridge neighborhood. And the Plan Commission recommended disapproval of this amendment. The developer has given us written notice that they are going to request withdrawal of this application at your meeting tonight.
Even given that, Clint, help us out a little bit on this, because I thought it was kind of weird. We approved a preliminary PUD that, with the condition that the PUD that we were approving was not acceptable, which just kind of, the process of having to come back and amend that one to begin with anyways. I mean, the developer has indicated, again in writing, that he's going to withdraw this particular notice tonight, but and I can certainly appreciate the neighbors' concerns for the increased traffic, and this is a particularly onerous lot to develop, as just evidenced by a few different attempts at it that none of which have seemed to stick to this point. So we have a preliminary that has been approved that with conditions that it has to be changed. What's the path forward? And given that curb cut that the developer was considering into tying it into Meadow Mountain, can he do that without? What are the options for the developer, and what are the protections for the neighborhood, and kind of what do you see as next steps for should this property be pursued for further development?
Sure. So this was the approved concept plan that did have conditions, one being that the density had to be lowered to a max 9 units. So, under this plan, they can come back with a final PUD that meets all those conditions. There was some other conditions with design and setbacks and green space. If the final plan they submit meets all those conditions, then staff, city, would consider approving that. That would not include the entry point in the Western Ridge. We felt like that was a big enough change to the concept of the overall development that required a concept amendment, so that's why that's in front of you today.
Okay.
If they do come back with meeting all the conditions and remove that connection, then that would be meeting the concept plan and then go forward with their final PUD plans. The other option is if the developer would like to keep that connection to Western Ridge, they could potentially request a rezoning back to single-family zoning. That would have to come through the public hearing process. And then the ordinances would allow connection back to that subdivision, but they would have to develop at the densities and the requirements of that single-family zoning, which their current plans do not meet.
Okay. So, I mean, and if this had just stayed, just for my own edification, if this had stayed single-family zoning from the beginning, we hadn't approved the preliminary PUD, I mean, he could have taken that house and removed it and put a street in by right almost, or without any further approval from us, if that had remained single-family? Okay.
You would have seen the subdivision plats that would have to come through, but again, with subdivision plats, if they meet all the city's requirements, then the city is obligated to approve those.
Okay.
We have a similar obligation to allow him to go back to single-family zoning, or is that, do we have discretion about that?
That's that would be a zoning change.
Okay.
So Clint, procedurally, what do we just accept the withdrawal tonight? or how
It's
does that
staff's
work?
recommendation that the council approve the request to withdraw.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll open a public hearing to allow the neighbors to speak if they want to address the question of withdrawal
Yeah, yeah.
only, and then,
Most of the neighbors know that there's a withdrawal. We're gonna, because there was a lot of people at the plan commission. And
We did try to get the word out today.
Okay.
good.
And I guess, yeah, and so, all right, so preliminary, and we just need further conversation about, we know Chapel Road needs to be widened and improved. We know there's access issue, even with the original one that we approved and with even the amended one that we were going to be considering tonight, Fire said that the response time was unacceptable. They're just, I encourage development in my district, but I know that this needs some further scrutiny, just in terms of what it might look like going forward. So, and how it relates. So, just one more curiosity question. So, the concerns that, say, through the existing Western Ridge neighborhood, the increased amount of traffic, which was contemplated, if this had been built out to its full potential, would have gone from, I think, and there would have been a traffic impact analysis that would have been required before any sort of development would be allowed.
That's correct.
But a street like Meadow Mountain or Lost Trails that would empty out onto Chapel, average vehicles per day would go from 500, I think 2,000 was going to be 500 to 1,500 or 500 to 2,000. I remember there was 1,500. I'm not sure if that was additional or that was total.
Yeah, I was confused on that too.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering what the capacity of a 2-lane residential street like Meadow Mountain, what capacity we assign to that, and just how much traffic that would have generated relative to.
And Lost Trails also.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like the full build out would be 1,500 extra vehicles per day, a
Okay.
24-hour period. Trips.
Yeah.
Generated in a day. That the Western Ridge subdivision does have 3 access points to Chapel Road, so that would be, diverted over those 3 roads with the extra 2 access points from the proposed subdivision. So that would not all be at one point, so it does help with that. But it would, obviously have a significant impact,
Sure.
especially if you've not had an access point there for
Right.
20 years, as
Yeah.
that Western Ridge subdivision's been there.
So I guess I'm answering my own question, reading the background material, that we assign a estimated capacity of 12,500 vehicles per day, like vehicle trips?
That's when at level service D, which is
Okay.
not optimal.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Well, thanks.
But to add on to that, I remember also talking about other infrastructure needs that were in that area for it to be developed fully. So I think that's something that needs to definitely be addressed as well, besides just the road, but also waste management. I think that was the concern the last time we chatted about this.
Right, and they've started working on that. There are some capacity issues in the area that they're working on doing some studies on to determine, what needs to be done to serve that property with sewer. And then there was a condition for widening Chapel Road in front of that property for a turn lane.
Okay.
And that's going to be a condition whether it's this amended layout or the approved layout.
Okay.
And Plan Commission did recommend disapproval of the amendment. 803 is a rezoning at 526 North Fifth Street from C3 to O3. This is a lot between Jefferson and Waco Drive along Fifth Street. That's a mixed-use area. The area is called out to be our mixed-use core, which is our downtown land use designation. Currently, there is a C3 zoning on that. C3 is a commercial-only type zoning, where O3 is more of a mixed-use district that is more in line with the Imagine Waco plan and the comprehensive plan. This is the property. It is currently a single-family house, but that's zoned C3. So this zoning does bring it into conformance with the zoning ordinance, as well as provide some opportunity for the property to be used for other type of mixed uses that are compatible with the area that's located in.
And Mayor and Council, Councilmember Meek has filed an affidavit of substantial interest.
Plan Commission did recommend approval of that one. And then the last public hearing is an abandonment request for a portion of Jackson Avenue between South 8th Street and South 6th Street. This is a request from Magnolia Silos LLC. This is the portion of Jackson that's on the south side of the railroad track, the side that doesn't have the street in it. The Jackson right-of-way is about 75 feet in width. The railroad has an easement through there that's 30 foot wide, and they are requesting to abandon everything between that 30-foot easement and their property as part of their master plan efforts for the redevelopment of the silos. You can see here that it varies on this end from almost 19 and a half feet down to about 18 feet on the 8th Street side. And you can see pictures of it, so it would be this area in here. This would allow them to control that area a little bit more. Most likely, they're going to move their fence back closer to the tracks. So it does allow for that property to be used as part of the development, as well as make it a little more safer through there to restrict access. There are some utilities that cross the property. We do have a sewer line that will have to retain an easement for, I believe Atmos has a utility in there, and then there are some railroad facilities that they'll need to keep outside of their fenced-in area, and we do have those as conditions. Plan Commission did recommend approval of this request. That's all I have.
Any questions? All right, thank you, Clint. Appreciate your presentation. Staff has requested, while we're getting set up for this next item, staff has requested that we pull Resolution 2019-806 from today's agenda and put it on a future agenda, probably next meetings, to give them a little time to answer Councilmember Holmes' good question. So if there's no objection, we'll pull that from this agenda.
Fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Our next presentation is a discussion of the renovation of the Cotton Belt Railroad Railroad Bridge. I'm already putting a trail across it, across the Brazos River in downtown Waco and the connections with Mary Avenue Corridor. Megan Henderson, Executive Director with City Center Waco, and Jonathan Cook, Director of Parks and Recreation, will present.
Thank you for this opportunity to come before you and let you know some of the projects that we're working on. First, I'd like to just kind of set the stage for the presentation. We'll be looking at the Mary Avenue corridor, giving you a little bit of context for why we're looking at it in the way that we are, the smaller study area before us right now, and the purposes of that. We'll also look at the railroad bridge, kind of the background of how City Center Waco came to own it and the aspirational and practical proposed uses for the bridge. There's some attractive city-owned property that's part of the conceptual study area. And then we'll look at kind of the conceptual design for Mary Avenue and next steps. The city is at least contemplating bus rapid transit along Franklin Avenue because such a use really creates connection between lots of existing strong nodes of activity and developing nodes of activity. So we're looking at downtown, we're looking at the Elm Avenue corridor, we're looking at Baylor University, and potential future uses for Floyd Casey Stadium. Mary Avenue creates a potentially connected trail area that parallels the BRT proposed line. Through downtown only, the extra right-of-way left by the railroad comprises 94,000 square feet. Much of this is vacant or underutilized, and that really creates a lot of opportunity, not only for the meeting of needs, but for the meeting of aspirations. The conceptual area that we've been looking at, this is a study done by City Center Waco, supported by the PID, working very closely with several departments of the city, and supported by CPNY, really looks at an area that connects several discrete locations. In front of you in the bottom right, you see a picture of what's thought of as Nick's Junction. This is private property on the east bank of the river. And then across the river, of course, we have the Cotton Belt Railroad Bridge. There's city-owned property on the west bank. And then as you know, continually we have new projects developing like the 3 hotels, but there's a section of Mary Avenue that's very urban and built up, and then there's a section further west towards the transit center that's very open. These two sort of components of Mary Avenue create the opportunity for different conceptual ideas. So along these distinct different areas, the purposes of this study are to create some consistent elements that will link among all of these very different individual projects, to create an aspirational vision that will attract further development and meet the needs of existing users of downtown, as well as create some context for some of the projects that are currently being planned, like the Cotton Belt Railroad Bridge. Ultimately, we want to be able to inform both private and public investments along the corridor. City Center Waco received the Cotton Belt Railroad Bridge as a donation from Rick and Lisa Sheldon. Their purposes in that were to facilitate the creation of the East Side Riverwalk, but also to create opportunities for future connectivity and a really aspirational public amenity. A citizen-led committee was formed to create broad engagement in the development of this project, and those folks have put in hundreds of volunteer hours to collect, gather around the table, hash out potential ideas. We had donated input from a Baylor design class. There's been public meetings and input in person and social media. The development of the concept for the railroad bridge has been done I neglected to mention the donated work from design professionals at CPNY, thanks to David Nisbet, who is here, and Diane Deaver, who's the chair of the committee. All of the work to date has been done without City of Waco or TIF appropriations. The bridge itself is envisioned as a connector and a destination. So as we said, this is a volunteer-led conceptual design. There's been extensive public input. And then there really are kind of two major decision points. The creosote timbers and lead paint have to be remediated. But the choice is either to repair the existing structure so that it can be used in the future or to remove it. So necessary is to remediate the lead paint and creosote timbers. And then ideally we would address the structural degradation of the bridge, and then the opportunity is to further move forward with widening the walking surface and adding railings and lighting and making it really that connector. Here are some preliminary renderings that show the vision that has been developed up to this point.
Mayor, Council, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about this project. And as you know, I was here last meeting and able to speak about our It Starts in Parks initiative. And this project and our commons area and the bridge really speaks to three components that we looked at in that initiative: community, connectivity, and then collaboration with our public. And to give a little perspective, we have a map up on the screen to give us a little whereabouts. If you see Mary Avenue coming down, and we know all the development and the hotels and the hustle and bustle of activity we're seeing there. And one of our main goals with the involvement of this project is how do we use an inviting method to get people across to the bridge. And so we're looking at that right now, and if you will, sticking with the railroad theme and the bridge, I see this as really a crossroads. You come upon this crossroads and the railroad track, and you can take it one direction and you go to the new riverfront development, the Promenade or Baylor University. You could go the other direction, go to the Suspension Bridge or Cameron Park. But perhaps even more importantly, we're connecting to the other side of the river. And you can get over there and you can take the river walk to the Doris Miller statue and the Bledsoe Miller Community Center, all that available on East Waco, or on a game day, you can come across the bridge and go up to McLean Stadium. So we have the external crossroads that we're looking at, but then also internally, I feel we're at a crossroads. If you look at this, we have some beautiful green space, and when you talk to people throughout the city or other cities that come here, they're amazed that Waco has so much public green space along the riverfront. And I must admit, this has been an area that within our department, we've always said, you know, it's a great spot. It's beautiful, right on the river, right in downtown. But we've yet to do anything with it. And I think it's a matter of timing, and the timing being right. And I think now is our opportunity as we look at this property, or we're at a crossroads, and we need to determine, are we going to take a direction and take this area to the next level? So, in looking at that, I bring up this picture, and as I was preparing the presentation, had the opportunity with the management team. Drake McLean came and spoke to us. And he threw out a saying that stuck with me and made me think of this project, and that is, you'll never become what you want to be by remaining what you are. And I see that with this property. We can keep it at the backside of Benny Keith, sort of hidden, but if you look here, look at this, what you can envision here. And you see a walkway that's very inviting with different types of food trucks, a plaza area overlooking the river. You see the connections and really creating that inviting space. We want to take it and, lack of better word, we want to transform it into an urban park. Really a community gathering place with a focus on functionality, focus on flexibility, but also when you're looking at an urban park, it's very important to create comfort and then a sense of safety for the people who are coming here. So I think more than anything, it's a gathering spot. And I just really love this picture and looking down and thinking about with the plaza area, to have people just sitting there enjoying the view, maybe taking a little break from the hustle and bustle of downtown, coming here and just sitting here for a nice lemonade, maybe something for a food truck. So lots of possibilities. And so that's conceptual, but how do we make that happen? And if you look here, we have our activation opportunities. And we've got 4 renderings over here of different projects of really how different cities have created these opportunities to gather about and really linger. And you want people to stay. You want it to be inviting, almost back to the train, like a train station. You want people to gather around. And so in looking at that, we have the plaza area and the bridges. And a couple things. We have programming opportunities. And this can be something, I think about going up to Dallas not long ago, and they have their Continental Bridge that's become a pedestrian bridgeway, and they had yoga classes out there. But then also in yoga classes for kids, they also had life-size chess pieces. And so they had a teacher out there teaching kids how to play chess with life-size chess pieces. So a lot of programming opportunities, and then as I mentioned, mobile commerce. Everything from an ice cream push cart, lemonade stand, all full-blown food trucks. You have that opportunity within this plaza area. But also from a design standpoint, the seating and the landscaping is very important to us. And that creates that sense of inviting. You know, I was at the state fair recently, you know, and what they do with the flowers and their different areas to sit along waterways, really impressive, but that's really important in the design of this public space. And then finally, you want it to be interactive. And not so much in the sense of a traditional playground, but whether you have some sort of a climbing features for some kids or even art. I think we've seen art be very successful, and I think of it, I call it old school, but down in Corpus Christi on their riverfront. They have a simple monument of a statue of Selena. And it is amazing how many people go down there to see that. So just creating some sort of historical significance and capturing our cultural significance that we have in this area. It's one of our oldest parkland areas of Brazos Commons. I think is very important, and that grabs the interest of people coming down here. So finally, I take another step back, and this is a different view of the rendering, coming from the opposite direction and looking across to that east side of the river to really show the connectivity that we're trying to harp on. And you get back to that crossroads, and it is that connection to the East River Walk. And over on the East River Walk, as Megan said, is some privately owned property that's right now being termed as Nick's Junction. And it's an area, if you see at the very top of your screen, there's a green space. And within our department, we call this Turtle Cove. I don't know if you've ever gotten the chance to visit, but on a day you can go, there'll be up towards 50 to 100 turtles everywhere. But what we have to complement the urban park on the downtown side, we have the ability to create a pocket park, a nature park, to where you can go out, you can see the turtles, you have birds in the reeds, you have a boardwalk going over. And so we really feel like that's a nice complement to create a peaceful setting on the east side, and then also create that connectivity going to the development we have on the east side. But I think most importantly, in looking back and at this project, I'm going to transition back over to Megan, because it's really important to see that Mary Avenue and University Park's intersection and how we're going to get people across to this public park.
That's right, thank you. So as you've seen, there's a private, coordinated but private-led conceptual development underway and wrapping up for the east side of the Riverwalk. The input into the concept for the bridge is essentially complete and vetted. We have a design kind of on the table with which to collect public input over the process of the month of November for the west side and the city-owned property, as Jonathan just discussed. Now we're looking at conceptually, how do both those urban and then the more open portions of Mary want to look, so that we're creating kind of where are we going with this further down the corridor. The first opportunity there is that important intersection of Mary Avenue and University Parks, and the design team is leading stakeholders and ultimately the public through some, just looking at some gateway features. As we move further on down the corridor, we're looking at intersection treatments and traffic calming. So that's a process that's currently underway. Next steps are going to see public input into both the urban area profile and that more open area profile in the course of the month of November, with a recommendation going to the City Center Waco Board at the end of November. Simultaneously, as the council is aware, there is also a deeper dive at the streetscape and solid waste system improvements in those first two blocks of University Parks. That is a separate process, but it is being coordinated with this one so that they mutually inform one another. That process is expected to continue forward and wrap up in January, February. As we're looking specifically at the railroad bridge itself, we are hoping to come in for the TIF at its December 12th meeting and look at those potential alternatives. Preliminary estimates indicate the cost to remove the bridge at about $3.5 million, cost to repair it at about $4.3 million. That addresses the structural issues, including some rust packing, and would allow us to stop the degradation of the structural members now while the thing is still very robust. At that point, we also can contemplate whether we want to move forward with some basic pedestrian improvements. And the conceptual work currently underway will supply the missing piece. We do not currently have estimates, but are working on those right now for the connections to the trail system itself. Thank you for the opportunity.
I'll start off the comments here. Megan, thanks for the presentation. Jonathan, always great hearing from you guys on this. And let me start first by Rick and Lisa Sheldon kind of started this whole deal buying that bridge and just so we could complete our Riverwalk. And I think it's great to make sure they're continuing to be recognized in this deal. It's such a neat concept on Nick's Junction too, is an homage to a young man who was taken away from us way too early. But anyway, this whole deal, I love it. And the Mary Avenue corridor, all the history behind that, and what we can do with making that more of a pedestrian type street. And then as we preserve the railroad bridge, I think is the second oldest bridge in Waco, behind the suspension bridge. And so there's a lot of history behind that, and what Mary Street used to look like as sort of a warehouse district is just kind of cool to reflect, to me, because I'm a history buff, but to reflect on the hustle and bustle that was going on there, and to somehow sort of re-commemorate it, I think is a great deal. So I like this project, and as we move into how to fund it, we'll definitely stay tuned on this, but I appreciate the work you guys have done so far on this. Looks great.
I just want to say thanks to Mrs. Deaver, who I see is here, who's worked hard on the committee, and all the other members of that committee. I appreciate that. This is really exciting. I say let's go, let's move, and knock it out. So it's really great. In terms of, Jonathan, I really liked your descriptors. I think that a park that I've been to recently was Clyde Warren Park in Dallas, and they had a really unique, I thought they did a really good job there of having some permanent structures, some food trucks that could kind of come and go, and it was just, I think they struck the right balance of not having too many commercialized buildings on what should be a green space, but there was some permanent structures that allowed for that kind of coming and going. You're hitting the right tone here perfectly, but I just think that as we can continue I would just emphasize, and I think this is exactly what you're saying, is that as we contemplate programming, make sure that we make it as easy as possible for said programming, and that it is easy for activity to occur there. And if there are permanent food trucks located there are a couple of like permanent spaces that people know are always going to be open. It's going to be easier to say, let's have that yoga class there, because the lemonade stand is always there, and they're not there on Tuesdays, but not any other days of the week or something like that. So I know that's how you guys are tracking, but I think that that's something that to try to keep in mind. Is there going to be true connectivity to our riverfront development? Is that possible, or what does the connectivity along the river look like?
Yeah, that's something that's being explored right now. Obviously, you have an active railway, which creates a little bit of a barrier. However, one of the crucial components is going to be for us to connect this plaza area down to the existing Riverwalk. And so the most likely method would be via the Riverwalk up to the promenade.
Okay, great. And then the last thing is, the render, and I don't know how exact these renderings are, but the screening between Benny Keith and this space, I don't know. I like the idea. I think on this it looks like food trucks kind of line that. So I don't know what all can be contemplated there, but I think some creativity and maybe a wall or a fence with a lot of vines or foliage to like make you forget that there's actually a distribution center next door.
It's akin to a blank canvas.
Sure,
So
that's what I would say.
there's a lot of landscaping that you can do, like you said, the wall covering, but that's something that we'll look at and consider to make that enhanced.
It's great. Well, I like it. I think that from my perspective, let's roll. Let's keep moving and as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Thank you once again for the presentation. I have to agree with what Councilmember Holmes and Councilmember Meek have said about the project so far. I look at it as, especially the railroad bridge, I look at it more symbolically of connecting our two sides of the river. closer together and bridging the gap, no pun intended, but bridging the gap there. I just think that's a great way to really just show the unity between both sides of the river and bringing those sides of the river together and really just making it a place where people would want to be down there and go back and forth with their kids and their families and in their baby strollers, et cetera, things like that. And so I really love the idea of the green space around the areas. You know, when we were in Louisville, and my friends in Kentucky will probably kill me for the enunciation of that city. But they had a similar railroad bridge there as well that connected two different states. And I really love the concept of how people utilize that, hundreds of people utilize that bridge per day, going back and forth, and they had yoga classes and they had scooters that would take them on each side of the river. And so I really could see that working for Waco. I could see where the food trucks are, you know, having more than just food, but having elotes there and churros and paletas and things like that that people can take advantage of as well. And so I think it could be a area where we can bring many of our constituents together and just make East Waco, downtown Waco, Mary Avenue corridor that much more fulfilling and thriving for our community. So thank you for all of your work. As well, let's move forward with it as quickly as possible. I would love to see this taking off already. And so if there's anything that I can do on my end, please let me know. But thank you so much for your presentation.
Thanks, Megan and Jonathan, for this presentation. Wow, from concept to today, this has been a project and in process for a long time, and I'm glad to see that we are here. Thank you to the committee members that have diligently met several lunches to get this through where we are. I think it's an awesome concept, and I have from the beginning. I did have two questions, well, one question really and a statement. The actual bridge, is it going to be activated space for mobile commerce also? I remember at one point there was possibility of something, you know, people could be on the bridge with stands or whatever on there, and I didn't know if that had been moved to the space on the rendering where the food trucks are, so that would be the only mobile commerce space, or would there actually be mobile commerce on the bridge as well?
The current design for the bridge does not preclude mobile commerce, generally speaking. Much of the specific planning of programming has been dependent on the structural evaluation, which is one of the later things that has been done, and an ultimate determination in terms of load, once the structural repairs have been made, would indicate what is possible. Okay. I will say that when we've looked at renderings and things, we've been seeing a guy with a wheelie cart of paletas rather than a full-on food truck.
Right.
But I think options are still very open at this point.
Okay, cool. And the other thing, that green space is probably some of the most beautiful property that I've seen, and the most beautiful underutilized property I've ever seen. We've talked about this forever, and when we stood out there and looked at it, I'm like, where's the Tai Chi class? It's supposed to be like right there. And that's what that's for. You know, those huge living chess pieces, those Tai Chi, the yoga classes, all of that's out there in that space as we prepare to go next door to the live concert that'll be happening in an hour, or as we prepare to go to the thing down the street. That, or the mobile moms that are always in Cameron Park, now they can come to the river with their class because there's space and program possibilities for those things. That's how we continue to bring people into our natural spaces so that everyone can say, oh yes, I didn't even realize that all of this was down here. And so the fact that this is now bringing all of that to attention excites me, and I am encouraged by the growth and development of this part of our city, because now we can really utilize all the things that we have. So my excitement is grand, and encouraging you to continue to do what you need to do to make this keep this in front of us, and so we can get to this spot as quickly and as fiscally sound as possible.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, my only, well, here, if you're doing follow-up, I just had a.
Well, I just, to what Councilmember Bearfield said about the commercial activity on the bridge. I do think, I like the idea of that, having that commercial activity, because I like the idea of distinguishing from the suspension bridge, which is another historic bridge that is great and pristine and historically preserved and doesn't have commercial activity, and having another bridge that, yes, the historical integrity is maintained, but maybe it is a little more activated for commerce. So I'm in favor of exploring that to the extent feasible. And then real quick, the other question I was just going to ask was the timeline on the Cotton Belt Railroad Bridge. It says we're asking for TIF funding on December 12th. But so when do you think that we'll have all of this lined up and ground can break and construction can start?
That was my question. Just, yeah. So, thank you.
That's a question that I can't really answer at this point. I think our process to develop construction documents could take a couple of different turns. We could do a traditional design bid build. It has been recommended that we pursue a construction manager at risk process because of the number of unknowns and the potential for developing value engineering as we go. But we will, once we know what the design for the connections to the Riverwalk on both sides are likely to be, and we have a complete project, we don't want to come to the TIF with a bridge to nowhere. So once we have those connections conceptualized and can start putting together what the development of that construction document is going to look like, then I'd be able to give you an estimate of time.
I think that moving towards a timeline is helpful. I think that obviously there's a lot of complicating factors of a historic railroad bridge going over a body of water with all the environmental concerns. I mean, this is not an easy restoration project, and that is understood and should be caveated so that the community has managed expectations. But I think that having a deadline, even if internal, that you can be marching towards will be really critical.
Yeah, and so just clarifying on that one. So the anticipated request to TIF on the 12th, December 12th, will be just to repair the bridge, and that's the 4.3 million will be used just for the repairs, right? It doesn't include the others. Do we have a timeline just for when the repairs would be done and when that construction and envisioning process can start? Just
No, sir.
whenever. Okay. Thanks.
But the visioning process can start simultaneous to the construction.
Or the repairs.
The repairs, yeah. The repairs, I mean.
Okay.
Not the, yeah.
Right, okay.
Jonathan, going back to your connectivity concepts, I didn't bring my computer, so I don't know what page that was on. But do you include connectivity to Floyd Casey area also, that vision of potentially extending Mary past 13th and going all the way to?
Yeah, and once again, we spoke to that last time, and there is that, it's rolls into that master plan as far as our trail connectivity. But obviously, that's the goal that we're reaching for, is to see it stretch down that way as we not only make an impact with the development, but with park property, it's a natural connection. And so that's something that's definitely on the overall vision.
Absolutely, because I see as we get those RFPs in, or as we get the proposals in, I should say, just visioning how that cool neighborhood could look and how that connects all the way downtown, across the river. It's a neat concept.
How are you planning to get public input? I know you had mentioned it on the next steps. How does that process look like?
Into the conceptual kind of profiles for Mary Avenue.
Well, for Cotton Belt, West Riverbank, the urban area profile.
Right. So the bridge itself, there's been extensive public input. The design for the west side of the Riverwalk is basically, we've got kind of a concept that is ready for vetting for people to comment on. And then the architect is working on basically an equivalent level of concept for both kind of the more urban section and the more open section. Those are in development right now. We expect to have those, kind of the very first part of November. And then we'll be able to have a couple of public meetings and circulate some of those renderings using some of our online social media avenues. We have met already a couple of times with specific stakeholders, property owners, along the way, so that we're getting a certain amount of input. But once there is a, hey, this is kind of where we think we might be going with this, how would you wiggle this or that aspect of it, we will be having a public meeting.
And is the word of the public meetings are put out via social media?
Primarily through social media. We are also able to let the traditional media know so that they can help spread the word.
Okay.
We also directly contact property owners along the corridor.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So quickly, Megan and Jonathan, thank you very much for this presentation. Glad to have this in front of council, and I think what you've heard is resounding support for moving forward with all due speed towards getting this thing done. I want to thank, Jonathan mentioned it, but I want to thank David Nesbitt for all the design work that you have contributed to this project. It's really, really appreciated, and hopefully will be a legacy for you in the city. I think this is it's an important project. It lends itself to continued economic development on the east side of the river and the connectivity. I think the fact that we already have the suspension bridge shouldn't deter us from looking at this as an important piece of connectivity.
That's right.
I wish we had it in place now as we're about to close the suspension bridge for, an extended period of time to do renovations. Understand that wasn't possible even if we had moved at lightning speed from the beginning of this donation. But I also want to thank the Sheldons for their generous donation to make this happen, and look forward to their plans, to seeing more about their plans for Nick's Junction on the east side. And finally, I guess I better thank Diane Deaver for her.
Right.
But
Good idea.
yeah, I get to hear about this project a lot, but I'm glad the other council members agree that this is a really important and exciting project. So thank you all both very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, our next presentation is a report on collections of delinquent accounts. We have Robert Myers with the firm of McCrary, Vaselka, Bragg, and Allen, and Rick Bostwick, Beard, Colgin, Brophy, Bostwick, and Dixon. Gentlemen.
A lot of names for two guys.
Working on this.
Can't have too many.
Well, that was a hard act to follow, particularly since our firm is a Mary Avenue property owner, where our offices have been for the last 8 years. Very exciting to hear. We are here and appreciate the opportunity to report, as we've done for a number of years now, on the status of your delinquent tax collections. And as I've said oftentimes in the past, as a preface to our report, we understand, number one, that your taxes need to be collected, and we are very interested in providing that service in a professional way and maximizing the collections on behalf of the city. But we also understand, and y'all have told us, and we completely agree, that our efforts on behalf of the city have to be balanced in so much as the people that we are collecting taxes from are the citizens, your neighbors, Robert's and my neighbors, and it not only has to be done professionally and maximally, but as well compassionately and with an understanding that most people that find themselves in a situation where they have delinquent taxes, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they have personal circumstances that have put them in that situation. And we pledge and try continuously to be responsive to that and understanding of that in the way we go about the process. That being said, the good news is, and I've said this before, our effort, I'd like to say, because you collect regularly over 100% of your taxes, that's all because of our good work. The reality is, to a large extent, the relative percentage of taxes is to some degree dependent on the economy. When times are tough, your percentages are somewhat lower, not dramatically so, but somewhat. And what you see in this chart before you is a continuation of now for a number of years of good economy and very good current tax collections. The number this year, and I'm going to let Robert speak to that, is slightly lower. And I say slightly, I mean it really is less than 0.1%, but there is an explanation for that, and I'd like to turn it over briefly to Robert to give you more detail as to why you see just a very slight drop off from 98.97 to 98.57.
Let me just say that, to put it in perspective, this is my 39th year of collecting the City of Waco taxes, and the last 8 to 10 years is some of the highest collections you've had, and this chart is the very epitome of what we can do in property tax collections. And as Rick was saying, we did have a little bit anomaly in our collections, and it's really reflective more on the next chart, which, as Rick was saying, typically when you add in your current tax collections and your penalties and interest that we assist the city in collecting in your prior year's taxes, you do achieve 100% of your collections, and that routinely occurs year after year after year. For this past year, our number is 99.9, and 0.1% may not seem a whole lot, but remember 1% of your levy is $700,000. And the reason that really occurred is not have anything to do with your collections, your levy. It has to do with just a timing factor. Very unusual circumstance. There was over $100,000 added to the city's 2018 levy in July or August of this year, of those 2 months. And that money, which is good news, it's all good news because you're going to get more money and it will get collected. However, it didn't get collected in time to meet the reporting cutoff for our charts. And so you actually have more money due than we were able to collect in the same period of time. But taking that number out, you would actually have achieved 100% this year, as well as you've achieved in every year thereafter before then. It was just a timing factor between the tax office and the appraisal district.
So on that, sorry, I just want to make sure because, I mean, you're right, 40 basis points year over year doesn't sound like a lot, but, I mean, considering in a bad year in the recession, we were still clicking away at like 97.5%. I mean, 40 basis points could be an indicator of some softening economic activity or just the overburdensome nature of property taxes in general, which the legislature has attempted to work on this past session. But I just want to make sure that when we're looking at our current tax collections on this chart before this one, that 40 basis point decrease in year over year, there's a specific explanation for that, or that just is, it's just coming in slightly slower than it has in years past?
I think it's a variable. Again, there's two things that happened. You got an additional set of taxes late in the process. Again, these taxes are 2018. They're first levied in October of last year, and their collections go through August or September 30th. And these taxes got added to your roll too late for them to go through the collection process to get counted for through the cutoff period for this annual time. And if you added those back in there, you would come in very much close in line with what you've had for prior years. Actually, I put the wrong chart back up. You were talking about this chart here.
Oh, it's the one before that, actually.
Yeah. This one here.
Yeah, that one. Just again, because that 40 basis point year over year, just on general current collected, again, doesn't sound like a lot, but considering our baseline is like 97.5% in bad years, back in 15, 20 years ago, 40 basis points actually is a fairly large amount.
Whole dollars is, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, and just in the economic, it's indicative of current economic conditions. So we just want to, if that is a true number, we just want to be cognizant of that. That's all I'm saying.
And just to reiterate, though, if you look at 98, 97, you're running out of room to grow.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There is a point where there's going to be a natural cycle of late payments coming in that require the activities that we undertake to collect the taxes. Typically, the city's collections several years ago were closer back in the 97% range averaging. And they've crept up over the years to 98 plus on a regular basis.
So taking into consideration those two factors that you mentioned, if it wasn't the case for those factors, going back to Councilmember Kennard, you don't see the economic development of the city of Waco softening or lessening or slowing down?
There's nothing in the tax collection figures that we have for this year that indicate anything other than what we've seen in the last few years, which is very positive.
And what was that cutoff date that you mentioned earlier?
Well, we do the city's fiscal year, which goes from October 1 through 9/30,
Through
September
9/30,
30th.
okay, perfect.
Yeah. And those taxes got added late in July and first part of August. And the taxpayer gets billed and has an opportunity to pay those taxes. They just didn't pay them. And that occurred late in your cycle. That's very, very unusual.
Right.
But the process of property taxation in the state of Texas is going through a revamp. There's major revamps in the legislature this past year that's going to really, you may see more timing issues. Not that it's going to decrease your collections or decrease your revenue or your percentages. There's just be more timing issues that may occur in the future.
But those taxes were collected, they just they weren't collected in time to make the chart?
They will be collected.
Right, they will be.
They're still outstanding.
Okay.
That timing issue is, again, death and taxes, right? I mean, eventually, most of them get collected, but it's just understanding the current collections.
Right.
When they start dipping like this, that could be, it's important for us as policymakers to understand that it might be indicative of slight softening.
Very good point.
Just worth noting.
Absolutely.
And I think those are good questions because obviously people have been predicting and looking towards a potential softening for some time now. Jamie Dimon as late as early this morning reflecting on the same thing, but we don't have anything in our data that is suggestive of that in our data.
Okay, thanks.
If you'll look at the next chart, what that indicates, obviously, and again, we've already addressed it, is that except for this approximately $100,000 timing issue that we've already discussed, you are consistent with prior years. Again, the data doesn't suggest any softness. It's just a timing issue right now. And what this does indicate is the city has been able to consistently, ultimately collect over 100%, which is a remarkably, says a lot about our citizenry, frankly.
And your economy.
The next chart indicates kind of the progression of collection. It's turned over. 2018 reflects the latest levy and the work that has been done, but as you can see, with each increasing year, you collect more and more.
And it shows that property taxes are a stable source of revenue and a high source of revenue. You are the small fraction of taxes unpaid to date from those 4 or 5 years you have up there, and really 2018 just really is added to the mix. That ultimately the city is collecting a very high percentage of its taxes. A very small percent go unpaid for the city. It's a stable source of revenue, and it's a source that you can rely upon when you're setting your budget, you're adopting your rate, you're looking at your levy. How much of this are we going to collect? You're going to collect most of the money that's out there to meet your budgetary needs.
And again, our data and these charts don't indicate any softening at this point, which you would need to take into consideration in terms of future budgeting based upon delinquent taxes.
Okay.
And this next chart, these three pies, they really represent what our firms do for the city in the property tax collections. As I was mentioning, in October of each year, you actually levy your taxes. They become delinquent if not paid by the next February. Then in that July, you turn your unpaid taxes over to us. And these three pie charts represent the last three sets of taxes that you've turned over to us. The 2018 taxes, the pie chart at the top of the page, those are the taxes you turned over to us in July of 2019. And this is collections from July, August through September of 2019, 3 months of collections. And in that period of time, you turned over to us approximately $1,688,000 in taxes. We've collected 33%, nearly 34% of that in a 90-day period of time. The balance of those taxes that you turned over to us 90 days ago, some we've actually initiated legal action, some we've worked with your property owners to see what their needs are and set up payment agreements with them, and the balance of those taxes we're collecting, continue our collection activities on. The pie chart for 2017, this is what you turned over to us approximately 15 months ago, and we've collected nearly 75% of those taxes. And in 2016, those were turned over to us a little over 2 years ago. 81, close to 82% of those taxes are collected from that exact set of taxes that were turned over to us. And bear in mind, when we collect those taxes, this is just base tax figures up here. We also collect the penalties and interest that go along with them. And as you can see, from our activities in a really short period of time, I think we're able to recover a substantial amount of your taxes for the city and for the needs of the city. And just to reiterate what Rick has said before, we're very cognizant of the fact that the property owners who are paying these taxes to us are many times the parents of the children that go to our schools, our neighbors, the persons who make this whole city work for all of us. I've never walked into a taxpayer who doesn't pay his taxes because he's ornery, although every now and then we may have something like that. But generally, there's Mr. Kennard works with us at the appraisal district, and we do see some ornery people from time to time down there.
I'm one of them. So.
Well,
I don't know.
Yes, sir.
May I ask a question? I don't know if you're able to answer this, but over the last years, according to this chart, the bankruptcy percentage has increased. Any idea what that is due to?
The larger the levy, each year your taxes get up higher and higher. So just the fact that there's a larger tax amount out there. Plus, even though someone is in bankruptcy, that does not mean that they don't pay their taxes. Many times, in most instances, when someone is in bankruptcy, you actually will be receiving payments through the bankruptcy process from them. So if someone filed bankruptcy back in 2016, by 2019, you've received a lot of payments of those. The new bankruptcies that are just coming online for the 2018 year, those taxes very possibly will get paid through the bankruptcy process. Okay. And so a year or two from now, that wedge will be a little bit lower than what it is right now.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So even though they're in, a lot of it is just time passing too, right?
Yeah.
2 years later, they're out of BK and they're not
Right.
paying out of BK.
Right.
Hector, are you done with your comment on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I love these pie charts. I mean, it's a neat progression and it's an easy way to see the trend analysis here. So can you tell me two things I want to say about it? First of all, do we know this 33.7, yeah, first, Rick and Robert, you're doing a great job here. It looks great.
Thank you.
But the 33.71, that is how many months of collection work? Just for 10, is it 9?
3 months.
3. And it seems amazing to me.
Yeah, you turn those taxes over to us July 1.
Okay. So do you always, and I've been here 3 years now, and you guys come, and I love this presentation, but is there always 3 months that we're looking at? Is 33.71 kind of where it always is and after 3 months?
Last year, we were a little higher than that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. We work very hard on looking through the accounts. Those are turned over to us as of July of each year. They are delinquent as of February, but you don't turn them over to us until July. Even when they first go delinquent in February, we are getting reports in each of the listings of your unpaid taxes for that year. So we're looking at them and keeping track of those things. So actually, when you turn them over to us in July, we are literally hitting the ground running. We know exactly what's outstanding. We know what accounts are outstanding. We've been monitoring those accounts for months. And actually, in fact, in April this year, there was a business and manufacturing facility that was going out on us. We actually did a seizure in April this year of their personal property that included the 2018 taxes before you normally turn them over to us in July to prevent that property from leaving town without taxes being paid. So we are pretty quick on trying to recover those taxes in the shortest period of time for the city.
And I think there's every reason to believe that it'll go to, over a course of 2 years, it will go to 80%. It'll get greener as time goes by.
Yeah, when you get to that point at like 2016 taxes, which are the ones you're looking at, 81%, you're basically down to one of the largest segments in there, unpaid taxes. They're in the light blue. It says payouts and hardships are under state law. If you're a senior, a person 65 years of age or older or disabled, you can defer the collection of your taxes on your resident homestead. You don't have to pay your taxes. There's nothing. Otherwise, if you don't pay your taxes, I can, as your attorneys, file a lawsuit and sell your property. If it's your resident homestead and you're a senior, 65 or disabled, then that's arrests that activity. And so a lot of your older members of the community take advantage of that, and they don't pay their taxes on their homestead, and they accumulate. And that's what that light blue is growing. Is that at the top of my list? If you came to my office, you would see on our substantial declining balance listing, you'd see a lot of taxpayers whose taxes are growing in that area because they're taking advantage of, I guess the circumstances are such they don't have the ability to pay their taxes. And we recognize that, and the law says that they have that right to do so. And so that segment will never really get much smaller. It may even get a little bit bigger simply because it's an aging process.
I do like to see that little blue area getting, bigger, because some of our citizens are, have hit a rough patch, and they do need some time to pay for their taxes. And I think it's very important that we have those kind of payout structures available to our citizens to pay their taxes on out. So
we work with taxpayers to make sure that they're getting every exemption that they're entitled to when they come into our office. We make sure to see what the circumstances are that's maybe occurring that's preventing them from paying their tax on a timely basis. We sit down and work with them as to what their monthly income is and what their circumstances are. And especially if we're dealing with their homes or businesses, we want to make sure that there's something we can do that meets the needs of getting your money into the city, but also is tolerable for them and makes things work for them and their family members as well.
Thanks.
And just briefly to go exactly, and I'll go briefly through this. I mean, we've probably taken more time than what the city staff has anticipated. We do basically, we send out notices to all your taxpayers throughout the year. We do file lawsuits, take judgments, and sell properties. We have worked over the past number of years with the city to identify vacant and abandoned tracts that had a lot of municipal weeds and things like that on them, and demo liens, and have recovered a lot of property taxes and liens that we foreclose through our property tax foreclosure for that as well. I've got that listed over here. Municipal lien collection, we have 37 properties that we filed suit on and sold 22 of those properties. We also assist the city in any other debt collection. And finally, we work with Judge Taylor over at the municipal court and assist him in collecting unpaid delinquent municipal court collections as well. As you can see, there are over 6,500 cases were referred to us in this past year, over $3 million, and we resolved 4,700 of those cases, over $1.6 million, either through payment or through the judge resolving those cases at his level. And Rick and I have I know we have a new council member now and a somewhat newer member, although we worked with her mom when she was here. We've been members of the community for a long time. Our children went to Waco ISD. And this is our home and our taxpayers that we're dealing with. And although we realize we need to get the money into you guys as quickly as possible, that it's the folks that we live with, the folks that we grow up with and grow old with, and we appreciate the very opportunity to do that for you and your citizens. We thank you for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We really do perceive it as an opportunity, and we appreciate that.
Any further questions?
No, I'll just say great presentation.
Yep.
Thank you for putting it together. I appreciate the work you do. I look forward to this presentation every year. It's a number nerd's dream to look at how good this stuff is working. And I'd also like to thank 98.57 of the taxpayers of Waco for paying on time. And the 1.43, we're still waiting on you, but yeah, no hard feelings. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you both for your presentation and for the good work you do for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, are there any requests for future agenda items? Seeing none, we will now recess the work session and reconvene regular session for executive session as read into the record by the city secretary at 4:44 p.m.
given, the City Council will go into executive session in accordance with the following provisions. 1, real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072. 2, economic development, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.087. And 3, personnel, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.074. City Attorney Jennifer Ritchie. We are now in executive session at 4:44.